how's business? Business is good. Great. Revenues are up. They're like, yeah. How's your profit? Ooh.
That's exactly it.
What's the problem? Labor? Inflation? What do business owners need to do?
Hi, I'm Faisal Karmali. Welcome to Karmali Exchange. Business owners need to help each other out.
Keep on pushing to meet the needs of the customer will meet the needs of the business.
Almost 3/4 of business owners are more optimistic than before when it comes to their businesses. I don't know about that. I'm squirming because I don't really always buy that. The entrepreneurs that I'm speaking to, well, they're saying something different. We've got Andreea Bourgeois. She is the Director of Economics of CFIB. Andreea, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So do you believe it? 3/4 of business owners more optimistic? Is that true?
It really depends which quarters I'm going to say and which business owners you're talking to. You're basing what you're saying on a StatsCan survey, which is, a very valid survey, long running. They have a significant number of respondents. So sometimes the devil is in the details.
Okay.
It really depends who they're asking. I was taking a look at that, and I find that in particular, their sample tends to be maybe larger businesses, not necessarily the mom and pop shop. And they may be slightly more optimistic. I do find it surprising, and I am basing that on a survey that we're running with small and medium-sized businesses. So
can I just jump in there,
yes.
Andreea? Here's where I think with Stats Canada's numbers, and I'm glad that you mentioned they are speaking to larger corporations. And so generally speaking, bigger corporations are more optimistic about the future because they've got a lot more advantages that other business owners may not have. Okay, let's start there. But is it also not the fact that we're coming off of a very low base? When you think of the pandemic and right after the pandemic, regardless of the size of business, people feel better than they did, than they did in 2020 or 2021. And so things are a bit more optimistic, but it's coming off of a very low base.
That's exactly it. When you've been in such a deep hole, anything now looks better. So as an economist now, I tend not to compare to the pandemic. It was such a unique time from an economics perspective, from any kind of perspective, actually, but especially from an economics perspective, it was so unique. I think when we're looking at survey data, we should look beyond the pandemic. What was way before the pandemic, and try to put things in perspective. It's hard for a business owner because we're kind of what they're calling the new normal. And I hate that term.
Yeah.
But in other words, we will not go back. Things will never be the way they were. So one of the things when I said that, I do find it hard to believe, kind of like you said, you're talking to businesses out there and they're not like really rosy, and, you don't really see money flowing around as much as we saw it, 15 years ago. So definitely things are different. We are also running a survey, it's popular. So let me put things in perspective because I love numbers, but maybe not everyone does. The Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, we have about 97,000 business owners who are members, independent, family-owned Canadian businesses. They can be in all parts of Canada. We have a significant number of them in the western part. We have over 5,000 members in Alberta itself. And they are small and medium-sized. Basically, they are a one-person business, and they can be your accountant, your lawyer. They can be, your two-people roofer, the garage that you see down the corner, the Tim Hortons that you buy your coffee from, up to some manufacturers. We would have some suppliers to the oil industry. So some of them would be naturally larger, of course, but up to 500 employees, which is still not big if you compare it to a large corporation. And
Sure.
they're not on the stock exchange. So most businesses in Alberta actually have somewhere from 10 to 20 employees, depending on which sector you look at. Put it in perspective,
Okay.
right? So that's kind of who we're representing. We have been running a survey monthly from 2009. Before 2009, we ran it quarterly, and before that, yearly. And part of that survey, what I like the most about it, it's so easy to answer. It's about gut feeling optimism. It's asking the business owner, how do you feel about the future of your business? I'm not asking them to take out the ledger to look at revenues, at expenditures. I don't want to see the bills. It's that gut feeling. And for a Smaller business, that gut feeling is very powerful.
Yeah.
Data shows that they base their investments on that gut feeling. They base their hiring on that gut feeling, So actually, the number that we have got from the May reading in terms of optimism in Alberta was actually quite low.
Yeah.
So initially, when I saw the numbers from StatsCan, I said, oh, that's quite a difference. Usually we are running in the same ballpark, but not this time. So because I like numbers, let me quote you a few numbers. So one of the things
Okay.
we're looking, optimism can be on a scale from 0 to 100. It will never be
Sure.
0. It will never be 100. But mathematically, I kind of need those boundaries. Right now, optimism in Alberta was at 49.4 in May,
Wow.
which is really not that high.
Right.
It's so I have 50 as an arbitrary midpoint. You
Sure.
kind of, what does it mean when we are at 50? It means if you meet two business owners down the street, one would be optimistic, one would be kind of pessimistic about the future. So that's really as low as we would like optimism to be. Unfortunately, it's much lower, as you can see in Alberta. And you say, yeah, but it's decimals. I agree, but decimals matter.
Correct.
Not only that, but it's below the Canadian average, and it's actually below some of the other Western provinces. For example, BC, Manitoba, they're around the 53. The index doesn't jump. So I'm quoting very small numbers, but usually it's in very close quarters. Optimism indexes, they move slowly. It's not something that's going to jump,
So, Andreea, in your data, which province has the highest number and what's that number?
Well, currently the province that is the most optimistic actually was Ontario, was at 58.1.
Ontario.
It was a significant jump in optimism. One of the things that we've seen, usually we had PI, one of the other Atlantic provinces being quite optimistic, Nova Scotia. And you can kind of gut feeling, you can feel that. It's the beginning of the summer. There is some seasonality. Yeah. Businesses are optimistic. Sure. Money is not flowing around that much. So a lot of Canadians are looking to travel within Canada. And that kind of gives an advantage to some of the Atlantic provinces.
Sure. And you can see from that data, Andreea, that there is a dispersion between province to province. It's not huge overall when you look at the Western provinces, but when you look at Ontario, let's say, versus Alberta, there's a big difference there. Absolutely. When I speak to business owners and I ask them, how's business going? They'll answer, it's going good. Very few business owners say, my business is shit, it's all going to go to the toilet. By their DNA, being a business owner, you're taking on risk, you have an optimism already as a floor.
Absolutely.
Right off the bat.
Absolutely.
Then let's take the next level to that when I start saying, okay, how's business? Business is good. Great. Revenues are up. They're like, yeah. How's your profit? Ooh.
That's
well,
exactly
the bottom line's different. The bottom, and I go, well, what's the problem? Labor, number one. Inflation, number two. Costs of insurance and items like that, number three. They start nailing down because no one asks them, how's profit? People say, how do you feel about your business? Well, I'm a business owner. Of course, I'm optimistic. Number two is, how's business overall from a revenue? Yeah, I'm charging more. So you can still charge on the top line, but if you're not making money on the bottom line, the business is not going to do so well. And you're not going to feel that great at the net bottom, but you can always be optimistic if your top number is growing. This is the same problem that we see time and time again when these surveys come out. And I don't understand why we just don't go into, how do you feel about your profits of your business over the next 12 months? And watch the numbers change enormously, especially in provinces like Ontario, where they start talking about, yeah, I'm more optimistic, where you're getting an influx of how many hundreds of thousands of people coming into their province versus the other provinces. When you bring in 500,000 new people into the country, the number one landing spot is Ontario. Of course, they're going to have a lot more business coming their way, but does it transpire to the bottom line? According to the federal government, they're not increasing in business revenue. GST is not going up as much, and nor is profits and tax from profits. So that tells me things can be look good from the top line, but it looks shitty from the bottom line. What are your thoughts about that?
That's exactly it. You nailed it right there. Unfortunately, we didn't have a data series on profits. We are building it right now, so that's inside information. We're going to publish it towards the end of the year. But what we're seeing from the comments to the survey, it's exactly this. They are making more money in terms of revenues, but their expenditures are also much, much higher.
Yeah.
Right now, Alberta businesses, we have 73% saying that tax and regulatory costs are number one cost constraint. Insurance costs are the number two, and it's 71%, is the highest it has ever been. Insurance costs are going through the roof in many parts of Canada, not in Alberta only, but it's a fixed cost. It doesn't matter how much money you make, you have to pay that. You have to deal with it, and you have to pay it even before you're even going to make a profit, because usually you pay it before you know exactly what your products are going to be and how you're going to sell them. So that's a huge constraint of business. The other limitation on sales. So if you don't have sales, it's very hard to increase your profit. You can make revenue because you're charging more, but not necessarily profit. Insufficient demand. We are having about 50% of business owners complaining about insufficient demand, either domestic or foreign demand. That is the highest it has ever been outside the pandemic. The pandemic, they didn't have demand because, well, businesses were closed. So it was an artificial lack of demand. Right now, it's a natural lack of demand because consumers have limited disposable income.
Andreea, as an economist, and you look at this data and you look at all the other data that's out there that is outside of your own team that's producing the information, is the overall economy from a business owner perspective, is it really feeling like we're almost in a recession? Like we're just almost there?
You know what? For some businesses, it would. And this is the reality. A recession feels very different from business to business. I'll give you two examples. One is a garage owner. That guy is actually pretty happy when the economy is hard. You know why? Because people are going to fix their cars. They're going to fix anything, but cars in particular. The dealership down the road, though, he's like, oh, not many new sales.
Yeah.
So now in booming economic times, the dealership, remember the old days when we had cars lying down and the dealership's busy like you could not imagine? The garages will change tires and whatnot, but it wasn't the business that is now. So what a recession feels, it's very different. It matters. Some businesses are just in their growing cycle. They brought a new product on the market, and even in tough economic times, they're still going to bring in revenues. So to answer your question, what we're seeing in terms of optimism level overall, what we're seeing in terms of cost being so high, inflation being so high, we're seeing the same numbers that we have seen in the past recession. And I'm talking 2008, 2009. So the levels seem to be very close to that. However, what we're not seeing is unemployment. We're still seeing a very high demand for skilled, but also unskilled or lower skilled labor, which is not at all natural for a recession. In recession, you tend to kind of cut down on your labor force, reduce hours, and right now we're not seeing that. So that coupled with very strong immigration numbers, that makes us coast this recession, if there is one, very, very easily. In theory, we're not in a recession. Statistics Canada hasn't reported 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth for GDP, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
In theory, when your kid comes back from school and you say, well, did you do well? No, but my friends did worse.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that, we're not doing well, but we're not as bad as we could be or we have done in previous recessions. That kind of boom, that kind of demand that we're seeing, especially from immigration, because when people come in, they have to buy furniture, they still have to buy cars. We're still seeing this influx and this pressure on demand. There is still a high demand for some products, not as high as businesses would like, but there is demand, right?
And in Alberta, it's not only immigration, it's migration from province to province. And you look at that also, I think it's artificial or short term at this point in time until we kind of normalize out. When you look at all of the surveys and you look at the data, we're not saying that we're in a recession. What do business owners need to do in order to get that number in Alberta from where they are right now from an optimism level to being much higher, let's say like Ontario?
I think, it's not necessarily good to compare to another province. I kind of try not to compare my kids with one another, but to compare to your own potential. And, Alberta had very significant levels of optimism in the past, right? So one is attracting investment. And this is where government comes into play. Second is being smart about your business. Try to cut down on the products that don't bring you a profit. They may bring you revenues, but if it's so costly to run them, try to run your business in a very smart way. And we're seeing a lot of creative ways of running businesses.
Yeah.
From, you go into a pizza shop and no one comes to bring you the plates. they say the plates are there, please pick them up yourself.
Yeah.
And initially I was like, oh, well, you know what? I can do that. And this is a restaurant. This is not a takeout. So some of these models are really creative. Others are just innovating in terms of products, what the product would deliver. We're seeing a lot of technology being implemented. We like to call it artificial intelligence. The way I call it is just being smart about your business.
Right.
Governments can play a role, cut down on red tape, cut down on affecting construction in the middle of the summer. Patio season is out. Let's enjoy it, because that's when a lot of restaurants and hospitality businesses make money. So there are a lot of things that governments can do, businesses can do. And I think the message that I always like to pass on is for us as consumers to be aware that we want to support small businesses. They are the ones that matter. They're the ones that stay in our communities.
That's the one that builds the backbone of the entire economy in this country is your small, medium-sized businesses. We've talked about how they hire, how they grow, how innovative they can be, how they strengthen the value system of this country. I think that's very important. Andreea, you know, we could be talking for hours about this. I love this topic. I think there's a huge opportunity for many business owners, but it's not going to come with an easy methodology. It's going to come with a lot of hard work, innovation, creativity, and a lot of advocacy to the governments. And I'm very glad that you and your entire team are one of those advocates for small business owners. I want to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Faisal. It was a pleasure. You asked really good questions. You've done your homework.
Oh, thank you so much. This is a very passionate topic for me, and I hope that the business owners continue doing what they need to do so we can get through this. So I want to thank you for all the hard work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Karmali Exchange. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. You can also follow me on social media at Faisal Karmali, where we can continue the business conversation.